One of the things that we have to come to believe is that everyone has something to contribute in the life of the community. That no one is so poor that they have nothing to bring to the exchange. We've been created in the image of God. We've been created with potential, with capacities, with talents, and a design to maximize those, to use every bit of our God-given ability to accomplish useful and productive things in this world. Whatever erodes that, whatever diminishes that, whatever takes away from that sense of dignity and purpose is against the will of God.
Innovation is not the problem. People assuming that they're innovators is the problem. It's our attitude, it's our approach, it's our mindset. Rather than coming in and trying to establish ourselves as innovators in a situation, we go in and we seek, who are the innovators in this situation? Asking people to be the solution to their own problem, allowing them to innovate, that's what empowerment really is. That's real change. So that when we leave, we drive out of the dangerous neighborhood, we go to our homes elsewhere. Guess who stays? Guess who becomes a part of their own solution?
There was real truth in the fact that God has given everybody inherent dignity and worth and value. And when you set up a situation where you forget that, where you feel like you're just a little bit better than them, or you're more knowledgeable than them, or because you're more educated than them, you have more answers than they have, then you are set up to failure. You get the nice, polite nods, but you don't get transformation.
You've heard people come back from trips and say, oh, those people, they have nothing. It's this assumption there's just a deficit of human resources, economic resources, knowledge resources in a person's life, in a family's life, in a community's life. And when you have that perspective, of this needs-based perspective, what tends to happen is you quickly assume, oh, the solutions are going to have to come from the outside. The knowledge has got to come from the outside, the economic resources need to come from the outside. All solutions are not based in the community, but from outside the community, and in you come. And that approach is going to intensify people's poverty of being and poverty of purpose, even as you're trying to overcome their poverty of condition, their physical realities.
Needs-based development focuses on the deficits and shortcomings in the life of a person or a community. Folks, let's remember what's going on here. We've got folks who are struggling with a sense of superiority and God complexes. That's us in the room today. And we're trying to engage with materially poor people who typically are suffering from a marred self-image. Does it seem to you like a good starting point in that dynamic that we're trying to overcome, a good starting point to walk up to a materially poor person and say, what's wrong with you? How can I fix you? How are you broken? What do you need from me? Guys, it's not a good starting point to overcoming this dynamic. It starts off at exactly the foot that we want to avoid. What needs-based development does is it assumes that solutions and resources will come from outside of the individual or community. It says, you're poor, you can't do it, the solution is going to come from outside of you. And it sets them up for expecting something to be brought in to save them, which is exactly what we want to get away from. What needs-based development fails to do is to identify and to mobilize the assets of a person or a community. What's the goal? The goal is restoration. The goal is for people to have a sense that they're made in the image of God. He has blessed them with gifts, all kinds of gifts, physical resources, social resources, spiritual resources, and to get them to start to steward those resources and develop those resources more effectively. That's the goal. So by starting off by saying, I don't know what you got, but I know what I've got over here that I can use to fix you. What do you need? Doesn't start off with where you want to go. It starts off on the wrong foot. And so in needs-based development, we're ignoring the assets that are already there. Asset-based development starts off with what's right. It focuses on the capabilities, skills, and resources of the individual or community. Oh, I think it was about 12 years ago, I was in a Sunday school class at my church, and it was a Sunday school class on working with the poor in our community and how to do it. And I was told to go out and engage in an activity called asset mapping. It's a fancy word for basically asking people to list their gifts and abilities. And I thought it was the stupidest thing I ever heard of. And I was supposed to go door to door in a ghetto in the city in which I live. In the city in which I live, there are significant racial tensions. I was supposed to go into a ghetto full of African-American households. I was supposed to go in as a 6'10" white guy on a Sunday morning, knock on doors, and say, hello, I'm from this church called New City Fellowship. I'm from New City Fellowship, and I'm here today to love my community. What gifts and resources and abilities do you have? Now, it turns out this isn't the best way to do this, but off we went. I pretty much wanted to die. There was a class down the hall on the fine points of theology, and I'm thinking to myself, why didn't I go to that class? So off we go, 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Now, anybody who answers the door is not in church, so it's kind of a selected sample. So, knock on the door. A lady comes to the door. She's about 5 foot tall, an African-American lady at my navel. And I'm looking down at her as non-paternalistically as I possibly can. And she's looking up at me. Now, this scene itself was just bizarre. So African-American lady at my navel looking up at me. I'm this giant, I'm going, oh, dear Jesus, just beam me up right now. I said, ma'am, I'm from New City Fellowship. I'm here today to love my community. What gifts and abilities has God given you? And she looks up at me and she goes, what? I said, what gifts and abilities has God given you? And she said, what? And then from behind her, in her apartment, in a housing project in a ghetto, from behind her comes a voice. She can cook chitlins like there's no tomorrow. I looked at the lady and I said, ma'am, is that true? And she's kind of got a little smile on her face. And she said, I'm a pretty good cook. She said, why don't you come on inside? I want to talk to you some more. Right. So we went inside. She called all the people in the house together. We were all sitting around on couches. I didn't know what to do next. So I just reverted to my script. I'm here from New City Fellowship today. I'm here to love my community. What gifts and abilities has God given all of you? I wasn't sure what's going to happen next. One guy says, well, that guy over there, his name is Jake. He can fix bikes like nothing you've ever seen before. I've never seen anybody like this guy. He can fix bikes. And Jake goes, I am pretty good at bikes, but Hal over there, he's an auto mechanic. If your car is ever having trouble, Hal is your guy. He can fix your car. They spent 20 minutes bragging about each other. And I started to notice something. They started to sit a little straighter in their seats. They started to kind of have a little sense of that they were somebody. I looked back at the first lady. I said to her, I said, ma'am, what are your dreams? What are your gifts? I've asked her. Now I'm asking her, what are your dreams? She said, dreams? I said, yeah. And she said, well, I've never really told anybody this before. I said, okay, but we're connecting. She said, my dream has always been to have my own cooking business, my own catering business. I said, what prevents you from achieving those dreams? She said, I don't really know. She said, I guess what it comes down to, she said, I know how to cook, but there's kind of the business part of it I don't know how to do. She said, I think they called it a business plan. She said, I don't know how to write a business plan. I think I need somebody to help me write a business plan. I said, what if I had some folks from my church come who know business and kind of help you develop your business ideas so you can use your gifts to fulfill your dreams? She goes, I love that. Asking the question is poverty alleviation. Now, folks, I'm not saying this is the end of the story. I'm not saying you never bring in outside resources. I'm simply saying the starting point is to focus on gifts and abilities that they already have.
Okay, so we're going to pick up where we left off last time. Got a few different odds and ends of things to do. Okay, this is what section are we in now? The role of participation in community development, right? It's the process you want to focus on, not the product. Now, we might create what's successful from our perspective and send to our donors, but way more important is for the community members or the households involved that they can say, yes, this worked for us. This savings group thing we did, it was worth it. That was a good thing for us. Or they come back and say that savings group was okay, but, and you got to listen to that but. So they've got to be part of the funding success, and then you have to be able to respond to that. Does it make sense? So it's a step further where they're really at the table all the way through. And at the end of the day, they're speaking into, was this successful or not?
But his dad's an electrician too. Come here. Is that okay?
If you're working in a community where there's poverty, then you need to be looking at who else is addressing this in our community. What are those different groups and peoples, and how can we work with them and what they're already trying to do, and what might we add to the mix? And if you're outside that community, even more so, you need to ask who's working there, who's doing good work, and what does it mean to come alongside them to help them succeed. It's not about us running in and doing something new necessarily. It's saying what's already there, what's God's already doing, and how do we kind of jump on board and saying, I'm going to be faithful to stand with you as you do God's work in that community.
An asset-based approach is one where you really approach a community or approach your target group with the sense that they have things to offer, they have inherent dignity and worth that God has given them, they have experiences that you don't have. And so while you may be bringing some new technical knowledge to them, you are going to sit in the space with them and be a learner alongside of them.
When you come with relief in a place where people's lives are static and stable, with just limited issues, then oftentimes you're actually creating harm. You're harming the development process, or you're harming the people within there. Oftentimes that outside resource never helps people to see their own assets. It blinds them to see the assets that they have, so that they can be able to use those assets to emerge. And remember that the use of local resources is what brings in sustainability. Let outside resource, outside ideas, outside help only come to supplement what already exists, but not to replace it.
Peoples who are poor themselves as households and communities, their voice and their involvement is the essence of what development is. So participation is core. It's often been said it's the engine of development. It's what creates ownership of what's being done, and out of that ownership that creates enthusiasm. Let's get this done because it's ours, it's our idea.
If you want to make sure that the well is used, if you want to make sure the tractor is used, if you want to make sure the malaria nets are used, you have to use a participatory approach. You've got to get people to engage in the process, because if people own the thing, it'll work better. And that is true. But our message to you today is that participation isn't just a means to getting the tractor used. Participation isn't just a means to making sure the well is taken care of, but rather that having people participate in stewarding their gifts and resources, having people participate in the planning of how to use those resources, having people execute is a valid end in its own right. And so participation is not just a means to an end, but a valid end in its own right.